Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Today we're talking geopolitics. We're talking what countries are supporting Ukraine, what countries are not supporting Ukraine, because just recently we had a big Munich Security Conference, and I just thought it was a good kind of time point to discuss what's each country's position and what's my opinion on it, especially now that I've listened to the whole conference and listened opinion from many politicians and spokespersons. I'm pretty sure this video is going to be extremely long. Most of it will be me discussing every separate country or region, but at the end I will have essentially a sum up. So please, if you're here just for a quick video, just go to the end of the video and select that section. With that said, let's start. And I want to start with something that is kind of quite obvious. It's the strongest supporters, where there is not a lot of discussion about what it is that Ukraine needs, what it is that the war should look like, or more importantly, what it is the finalization of the world war should look like. And it's the countries around the northern part of Europe. It's the Nordics, Baltics, Poland, Czechia, and so on. I know that other countries like Britain is also there, but I will get to them separately. What we need to see about these countries is there is a strong moral understanding on this Ukrainian war from one side, because either shared history or just because how the societies are working, the values of European humanity are very strong in these areas, and seeing this kind of unprovoked aggression and injustice being executed onto innocent Ukrainians is very much in these countries relevant. Or on the other hand, a lot of these countries understand that if Russia would to win this war, then it would be a direct threat to them, because Russia would be in a very much stronger position after the war, and essentially these countries would either have to invest significantly into their own defenses, even if it's possible, or they will be the subject both of hybrid threats. Basically, it would make them a lot more unsafe, like directly unsafe. Sometimes we're talking about, Germany, that for example, Germany will be undermined by Russia if Russia wins, and the European Union will be undermined. But it's kind of, still farther away. Like when you take, for example, Baltics, they might be quite next on the chopping block. And so there is very little discussion. Everyone understands in these countries, in this bloc, that Russia needs to lose, that victory for Ukraine means very clear things. It's a full restoration of borders after the 1991 line, essentially declared by Ukraine. It's the concrete prosecution of all the war criminals from Russia. And it's definitely some kind of trigger for changes in Russia, because everyone knows that even if Russia is sent outside of Ukraine, even if the shooting will be stopped at some point, but if the Putin's regimes will hold, this bloc of countries understands really well that this would eventually be a threat anyway, that Russia will spend no time contemplating or trying to understand what they did wrong, in a sense of like maybe they should rethink this. They will instantly start thinking, well, how can we repeat it, and how do we make it sure that it's more safe to us? So they know that it will be essentially just a timely pause, and what would require is basically, again, it will diminish the security of these countries. Changes in Russia is a crucial part of this equation. I'm not sure yet how to achieve it. Right now, the path is only clear to Ukrainian restoration of their borders, but I think that it should be a step-by-step process. Restoration of borders, working with war criminals, and working with government in Russia. Very strong group. I would be hoping that more countries are in there. And one of the main country that is not in there, and this transitions us to the next segment, Great Britain was extremely consistent. It was represented in the Munich conference by Rishi Sunak and Ben Wallace, Prime Minister and Defense Minister, respectively. Rishi Sunak especially came across with extremely powerful speech, probably the strongest one in the Munich conference, where he was talking about significant support for Ukraine, strong dedication from the West. I like that they left a lot of the discussions about, like, what's a victory for Ukraine, that was discussing, like, that we should maybe look at the world past this. And I was like, no, 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 it's all doesn't matter. Like, right now we need to focus on Ukraine just winning. And that was kind of very, very, very strong message. So he promised long range missiles to be delivered to Ukraine, which is amazing news. And I'm really hoping that there will be a strong follow up. Potentially, these are the missiles that are now striking Mariupol in recent days. And just overall, it's a massive support, both from Rishi, both from Ben. Again, very clear understanding on what it takes to win the war. So they're very, very close to the same club. And I mean, they did sign the what was it called? The Tallinn agreement, I believe it was called. The Tallinn Pledge, sorry, it was called. Where they said, like, okay, we're gonna make sure that Russia is defeated. And especially Ben Wallace, he emphasized that more equipment should be sent to Ukraine, even if it temporarily is gonna weaken the defenses of the specific countries. So they say, because the weapons and armaments that right now are within the European Union, within UK and everything, they were made essentially to deter aggression. And now we have the extreme case of aggression right here in Europe. So why do we keep these weapons if we can just give them to Ukrainians, buy ourselves new and fresh and shiny ones, and Ukrainians will just do the dirty work for us? And I really like the messaging. I really love that there is such a strong support from UK, because they are literally spearheading a whole discussion. Very little that shakes UK's understanding, and I think this is one of the main drivers for Ukrainian victory to come. The strongest player to talk about also in this group of strong supporters of Ukraine is obviously the US. With the caveat that US obviously was represented by Biden, that was traveling throughout Europe and also went to Kyiv, which was by itself a super strong support. Just watch the video that I made. I'm going to link it somewhere. And it's been great. Definitely a lot of moral support. There is a lot of Biden politics that some people like, some people don't. He definitely tries to be this, man that's trying to pull allies from all sides of the aisle, and I think it's working well enough. We obviously, especially the people that really staunch supporters of Ukraine, really want massive support, massive increase in Ukraine. But I think this is where Biden and he's understanding that if we do something, we need to make sure that majority or pretty much everyone is on board with it. And this is what's kind of mostly like, there are some members in our alliance and NATO countries in Europe that are a little bit dragging their feet. And we're going to talk about them a little bit later. But overall, US by itself, I think they do understand, because both Blinken and Biden, very, very strong words, very strong words on what's gonna be happening with the Ukrainian situation. They also follow for Ukraine victory. Here, I would only say that whenever asked about Crimea, it's a very, very kind of the topic that is not yet discussed as thoroughly. But I think more or less the understanding that Ukraine will return Crimea and all its old territories is there. It's just they're never going to state publicly that they support it. They will just always answer Ukraine will decide on it themselves. It's a very nice position to have. It gives ambiguity. It gives not non-concreteness, which every politician loves. So I see nothing wrong with it, because what matters is their positions and displayed actions or inactions that they're displaying. And so far, nothing tells that they would not support Ukraine return of Crimea. They just never would admit it publicly. With that said, I gotta say, guys, from US, I don't know how you do it. I watched Kamala Harris's speech on Munich, and it was insufferable. It was almost to the level of speech of Putin. It was terrible. Like, I don't know why. Like, Blinken, I listen, amazing. Biden, pretty good as well. Really nice speeches, at least somewhat short. But Kamala Harris, Jesus Christ. I was listening and I was like, this is really bad, insufferable. I think she can win the prize for saying the most correct words, because she was like calling Russian aggression, she was calling for violation of human rights, she was calling for prosecution of crimes against humanity from the Russian side, and yet it was delivered in a manner that was like just completely atrocious, to be honest. I don't know what it is. So I'm hoping it's just me and maybe more people. Like, if you like Kamala, just, like, rage at me in comments. That's fine. But I slogged through it and it was pain. Then we have representatives from the NATO alliance, our General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg. And Jens Stoltenberg is extremely good professional. Like, in his speaking, he's someone that I would love to strive for if speaking would be something that I would want to do. I think his method of delivering a lot of these speeches is extremely well delivered. He takes very short, concrete phrases that has very strong messages. It's uh, the more weapons we give to Ukraine, the sooner the peace comes, or this requires from us the spending of money, but it costs Ukrainians the spending of blood, and things like this. Like, simple concepts, and he repeats them again and again and again and again and again, and very, very simple. And I love it for this. Like, his speeches are always very light to listen to. He obviously, by being just a bureaucrat, he doesn't have a lot of decision power. So a lot of the things that when he's saying, he cannot answer concretely. This is almost notoriously bad during any kind of question sections of his interviews, because, like, someone asks us, like, will you do X? And then he's like, well, allies has been doing something that's relevant to X for a while, yada yada, and we will continue trying to achieve if the allies will decide that it's relevant. He's just forced in a position like this. But the way he speaks, the way he delivers it, just his overall presentations are very much on point. And this also goes with the whole NATO position as an organization. I think he was a crucial point, and it still is a crucial point, in representing NATO as an organization in a very positive light. And NATO has also been consistent in the support for Ukraine. While NATO as an organization hasn't been doing a lot for Ukraine, like most of the things that were done by the member states, I still believe that at least the main point of the Article 5 and just the persona of Jens Stoltenberg just makes him, both him and his persona, and NATO as an organization more representative on a world stage, despite of the lack of impact on the Ukrainian war as an organization. Each member states of NATO, yes, but not as a whole organization, because there are members like, Hungary, Turkey, that are, we're going to talk about later. But overall, really glad that Jens Stoltenberg is right now General Secretary of NATO. Then we go into the kind of mid-tier supporters of Ukraine, and I'm going to start with Germany. Now, Germany, I've said a lot of strong words about Germany during the last year, and strong words is basically the headline of the whole speeches. I watched the conference with Baerbock. I watched the presentation by Scholz and question session. And I mean, Scholz has been known for saying a lot of really good things. The problem always, always, always has been the actions that were taken, or more rather not taken. So they would say that we need to support Ukraine with everything that we have, and then they say, well, maybe not right now, maybe in half a year. And that was always the issue. That was always the issue, because, like, the general headline messages are really strong and really good, and it feels sometime that Scholz, he's like kind of supposedly his heart in the right place. at least when he speaks and makes sentences and so on. But it often feels that it's either the past of the SDP, SPD, SDP, I forgot the correct way, the Social Democrats of Germany. Either the fact that they have this Caucasus that is favorable to Russia, and the fact that in Germany there are still a lot of peace groups that really just don't like war, period. And despite that, like if you are anti-war in this kind of offensive, that means you're pro-Putin, and they still just don't get it. For them, it's like, yeah, yeah, just stop shooting, like these peace idiot types, and this, I think, this is what makes a lot of Mark. I believe Scholz is has been challenged a lot as his person, that a lot of his internal beliefs, what he essentially strived for, has been conflicted with the world that changed, and he's presented with a challenge that he might not be fully prepared for. He is definitely, because of his personality and being an experienced politician, he's trying to adapt. He's trying to fit into this new reality, but it doesn't feel that he is comfortable in this new reality of the world that he finds himself in, because he wants to strive for this, like, peaceful world where we, build green energy, build peace and prosperity. And yet he's challenged by the aggressive genocidal war that is threatening the whole democratic world order. And it feels a lot of that is just colliding, because a big part of his speech was like, like, how do we build the world, how do we, go over this, go over the war and so on, and trying to kind of say like, oh, how do we get after this, and it's all important, but obviously, like, stopping the killing is important. And in that sense, I think Annalena Baerbock was just a little bit more precise. I really liked her, because while she's like speaking, she's the same way as me. I related to it very closely, because she's the same way. For example, she just starts explaining something and then she drifts away on some kind of tangent, and then like the lost of the thought that she was following, the thread just gets completely lost, and she's like takes a huge loop to come back to the initial point. And it was very funny, very, very funny. But overall, good words. But Annalena, she really clearly underscored that if the shooting just stops in Ukraine, if we just freeze the conflict, that is not peace. That is not lasting peace. She said that there's obviously needs to be more decisions made on how to get the war to be resolved so that we have lengthy peace in Ukraine. What I'm still not certain is whether or not they would support the essentially return of Crimea to Ukraine. But I'm more leaning towards the yes, that mostly Germany and Scholz personally, and SDP, SPD party, I really forgot what's the correct way to pronounce it, and that they went some way. And while there are still strong pushes for a lot of pro peace. Let's go back to how the world was before pushes, and people are still living with pink sunglasses on. I believe that slowly but surely the changes are happening, and slower than we would like. Let's put it this way. But they're there. So I'm optimistic to the fate of Germany, and I gotta say, I must take my opinion back. Like, as I said, I did right away a big, like, when Boris Pistorius, the new defense minister, came in. I did a little bit of a hit piece on him about like that his past was like with friendship with Russia and whatnot. And I said, like, if it turns out that I was wrong, I will gladly take my words back, and I am taking my words back. I was wrong. It seems that Boris Pistorius is a little bit more competent than I was. Well, I would say significantly more competent than I was imagining, and I'm not sure if his personal positions on the war, but he's definitely a little bit more competent as a defense minister. So props for that. France. France has been the progress of Emmanuel Macron. It was basically defined in the last year. He went from a person that was very often described as in bed with Putin, or at least in a, like a having like a regular, this phone sex with Vladimir Putin, to now becoming pretty much a leader that can lead France through this war. And here is the part where like a little bit I am a little bit uncertain on. Like his speech and his positions, and most importantly, his actions have been speaking very loudly. Like they definitely want Ukraine to win. They definitely want to support Ukraine. He's definitely a very emphatic person. He very much understands the pain of the Ukrainian nation that it goes through. But at the same point, I feel that it's not the same as with Scholz, that he's like completely wrong person in the place. I believe that just by the nature of his beliefs, he's a person that believes in discussion and dialogue. He believes in a fact that you need to achieve, if you achieve anything, you need to talk about this. And he's so strong in his beliefs, right, that I cannot not respect it. I completely reject this position. I think there should be no negotiations with Putin. Period. I think he needs to go, and the only negotiations that they need to have is essentially which way he would prefer to spend the rest of his life. Like, would it be like a cell looking west or south? West, south, north, or east. That's pretty much the negotiations with Putin that I would like to have. But Macron sees that potentially Putin can still be in power after the war is over. He definitely wants Ukraine to win, but he's so firm in his position, and this is different than not supporting Ukraine, because his actions are saying like, I want to talk with you, Putin. I want to give him this, like the ability, like something like a saving rig from him to get him out back to the negotiations, civilized world table, and so on, despite who he is. So we talk about it. But right now, there is no time for negotiations. Right now, it's time for action. And our action will be to give everything that Ukraine needs. So he does the right action, but he still has this position. And a lot of people find this very, very appealing, that this is very civilized, like very mature position. A lot of people are arguing for me that a person that can overcome any kind of brutality and still have the ability to talk with their worst maybe enemies is maybe a strong leader. That is not how I feel. As I said, I reject this notion. I think there should be a one-way ticket to hell for genocidal maniacs that killed hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people. But that is my opinion, and unfortunately I don't share it with Emmanuel Macron. Otherwise, France is more or less on the right track, and they are a supporter of Ukraine. The most unexpected allies that came out of this war situation were actually Japan and South Korea. I was extremely surprised. I was not expecting. We've talked about that. This is democracy against autocracy, right? And obviously, we have been talking about that democratic transformation of the countries should be happening with the countries accepting that democratic transformation. If the country is not accepting the democratic transformation, then it cannot be fully achieved. We've seen that plenty happening. Afghanistan was just the latest one. However, what we saw with Japan and South Korea, that not only their democratic transformation past World War II happened, and they became a huge success stories, but also, well, Japan now is obviously struggling. We know that the economy of Japan is struggling, but as democracies, they're still quite strong. And I was like, no one expected anything both from South Korea and Japan. The expectations were so low. For example, we had a conversation about a person from Serbia and saying is like, well, it's like not a lot of people talk about how Serbia influenced this war. Well, because expectations for Serbia are very, very low. Like we understand what Serbia is. And it was the same kind of for Japan and South Korea. Like, not that they were against Ukraine or for Russia, it's just they had their own thing in like kind of Asia Pacific, and it's like, why would you care? And yet they do. Both Japan and South Korea support Ukraine. They send the supplies. They send the help, and especially South Korea is investing in joint partnerships in Poland. I believe that some kind of entrepreneurial spirit of South Korea is seeing the possibility to integrate and promote their country in Europe, and I would welcome that. I think this is the way to go. I always underscore that democracies needs to stand together. Democracies needs to trade with each other. Democracies needs to go into tighter cooperation with other democracies while neglecting or refusing to trade, or having strong conditions on any kind of interaction with authoritarian regimes. And this is something we're going to touch a little bit later on, but I think this provides great opportunity in this sense of great dread that we're experiencing right now in Europe. I am very optimistic to see that the countries of Japan and South Korea are looking into ability to promote themselves within Europe, and I think we should welcome that. Talking about the same region also for strong supporters of Ukraine is Australia and New Zealand. Um, I mean, there wasn't a lot of change. It was very traditional to support kind of like this Western world, and definitely New Zealand and Australia are part of it. It's just I again, like, no one was expecting them to send anything to Ukraine, especially from Australia. Yet they are sending even military support. Like, it's the other half of the world. So I'm extremely grateful on my personal level to see that there is a strong support, and that these countries are bringing Ukraine into the fold of the Western democracies. And just by the fact that we're hearing the support both from Australia and New Zealand, we see that Ukraine is being brought into the fold of the Western Democratic Alliance. Then we go into the countries that are not that big of a supporters of Ukraine. And the first one on the list is Turkey. Turkey is a dictatorship. And I would also add here a country like Azerbaijan. And with Azerbaijan is hard. Well, not Azerbaijan, but Turkey is hard because Turkey is a dictatorship with a dictator that is not that much better than Putin. We got to be honest. Erdogan, if given the chance, if there would be a conflict about something else, if there would be a country in Ukraine, something like Ukraine, that I don't know, like maybe part of Greece or something. If there would be an option like that, I am pretty certain that at some point the conflict would happen. Like the problem of Cyprus might have been escalated sometime down the line. The only problem that Turkey is having is that they're having a very smooth brain dictator as Erdogan, because he broke the cardinal sin of dictatorship, which states, do not fuck with economy. You do not want the dictator wannabe need not to ever touch the economy. He can do whatever repressions he wants. He can do whatever political changes he wants, kill as many as he wants, incarcerate how many he wants, whatever it takes. Just do not touch economy. Economy needs to be independent. But what Erdogan did, he said, okay, I know better. I know better. And he started putting his dictator hands into the economic machine of Turkey. And this backfired incredibly hard. Ever since, like, I believe, like almost a decade now, Turkey's economy has been struggling. And there's a lot of people that really work hard to kind of get it back to working, but it's very problematic. Hence, Erdogan's main challenges have been all throughout this war is essentially how to make sure that this war is profitable for Turkey, how to make sure that Turkey is profiting from this war. And it's been a problem. There's been a problem for it because he's been successful some places, he's been less successful other places, trading with Russia, whatnot, trading with the EU. The problem is that recent and his ratings has been slipping because Turkey is not yet the democracy that is not unsalvageable. They still have elections; they're going to be rigged, but if it's going to be still an overwhelming majority of people that supports other candidate, there's a big chance that Erdogan will be forced to step down. And so far, we've heard that the ratings of Erdogan have been sliding, and it's been going quite bad for him. And more importantly, with the recent earthquake that took a lot of lives, and my condolences to every single Turkish person or person of other nationalities that live in Turkey. It has like the let's put it this way: being dictatorship or not has nothing to do to suffer from the natural disasters. So this natural disaster has nothing to do with Erdogan, his personality, or Turkish political order. And as much as I say that we shouldn't have been trading with Turkey, and if we wouldn't be trading with Turkey, if there would still be this devastation and natural disaster, I think we should have been the first to send help because that is a completely different matter. Worst case scenario as well, like let's say the same thing happens in Russia. And as much as I hate the Russians, and as much as I think that they, majority of them, the one that support war and everything, should be burning everywhere where it's the sun doesn't shine, let's put it this way, in hell mostly, uh, I would still consider us providing at least relief from the natural disaster. Because natural disaster is something that is not influenced by the political system. It is not something that is influenced by anything. It is just a thing that is threatening us and humanity. And I think the right way here is for humanity to be sticking together. It's just human values. With that said, Turkey, after the earthquake, and Erdogan especially, is suffering severe drop in support and ratings. And his elections are coming up quite soon. So he right now is in a very tough spot. He will be looking to get any kind of victories. So I'm not sure what he's going to do, but he might try to influence more the war in Ukraine, to put Turkey somewhere on this stage again, to try to win some kind of diplomatic points. So far, it didn't really succeed for him, as much as he tried being a Putin's message boy to Zelensky, and well, despite as like how useless it was, it hasn't paid off. So we'll see what he's gonna do, but they still might influence the overarching conflict. Then we talk about the pain points of Europe, something that my heart is in pain for the most. And mostly it's three countries. It's Hungary, Serbia, and Austria. Hungary, Serbia, and Austria are countries where either by the corruption of the Russian influence or by the popular beliefs, there is a strong support for Russia. And this support for Russia is so strong that people in these countries and the governments in these countries are literally denouncing humanity. They are saying that it is okay to invade other country and wage a genocidal war. And then Austria and Hungary like proposing some kind of peace plans and saying, well, these countries just need to make peace and whatnot. And it's just sickening, to be honest. And I know that a lot of people, both in Austria and Hungary, like are against it, but unfortunately, they are a minority. So it's something we need to be aware of, that in all of these three countries, all of the support there is for Ukraine is only a minority. So we as Europeans and the world need to look very, very carefully to understand Why do we have supposedly democratic countries, or semi-democratic in the case of Hungary? Why are we really having no support for the democratic countries of the world? Why are we having majority of people saying that it is great that some other nation can invade and destroy democracy, kill people, rape, murder, and do everything that they want by the might of right? Sorry, by the right of might. I cannot understand. It's beyond my understanding as a human being. I do not see any kind of for me, as I say, it's always three kinds of people that I cannot understand in this war, because they are beyond saving in my eyes. Because they support Russia, and they can support Russia for three reasons. One, they are just dumb or stupid or forgot what humanity even means. You know, that they like, it's a lot of these, for example, pro peace, like let's just stop firing kind of guys. Then the second one is that they are evil. It's the people that understand what Russia is doing is bad, but then they I other just okay, yeah, fine. I just didn't like Ukraine. I just think that Ukraine has no right to exist. I just not consider Ukrainian people as people. You know, these kind of guys, like people that are actual fascist Nazis, whatnot, people that just do not consider other human beings to be worthy, that think at other people that they are beneath them, that they are too insignificant to matter. And then there are people that are malicious. That's a lot of politicians. It's the people that, for example, know that what Russia is doing, and they might not even support it, but because they want to get clout, but because they want to be, you know, in the news, and a news cycle, make money, make some voice for himself. Like, I mean, Elon Musk falls really great in this. It's like whatever his reasons are, like a lot of what he's doing is just because it's making him clout. Like, he's proposing all of these things, paying lip service to Russia, stopping Starlink for no reason, just to be in a news cycle. That is just malicious, and I cannot. It's beyond me. So all of these three categories, and a lot of the people in both Hungary and Austria and Serbia, are a lot of people within these three categories. And this is a big challenge for us as democratic society. And the question of should we tolerate this is on table. And we should ask ourselves, how do we feel about this? So maybe write down in comments what you think about this. I'm open for suggestions. Maybe we'll discuss it at one of the streams. Almost to the last, I want to talk about the third world countries. Now, this is a lot of countries within Africa, Brazil, Argentina, and so on. It's the countries that don't give a shit about Ukraine. Like, the countries don't care about Russia, Ukraine. A lot of them are really salty about the colonial past. A lot of them are really salty about the climate change. They have their own agenda. They don't give a shit about Ukraine. They don't give a shit about people, and so on. So the people I saw representing at the Munich Security Conference was kind of miserable. Like, they just, with the wave of the hand, they dismissed any kind of war notion. For them, it doesn't matter, and they said, like, why don't you fight, you know, like hunger or climate change or whatnot? Despite, you know, it's like a lot of prosperity in the world comes from peaceful prosperity and not warmongering. And I mean, nothing was expected from these countries, and they are completely, essentially paying, in my book, for their reputation. So if you're from there, I'm sorry, but that's how a lot of your politicians are coming across, and representatives that I'm hearing from your countries. It's a little bit fucked up. And for me, as a person that supports Ukrainians, you can obviously say the same thing to me. You know, it's like, well, why don't you like comment on the war in Syria? Fair point. But we know that a lot of the war in Syria was promoted by Russia. A lot of wars in Africa is promoted by Russian Wagner groups and so on, like Mali and so on. Russia is a big part of the corruption in the South America as well. They're a big proponent of that. So Russia has its dirty hands everywhere, and I think a lot of the post-colonial perspectives On the old world, the European and the West, here is what essentially clouding any kind of civilized approach to the discussion of whether or not invading other land is good or not, and it's just being dismissed, and I cannot accept that. You can criticize me for not accepting this, but I don't expect anything. So whenever people say, "Oh, but why don't you criticize, I don't know, Algeria for not sending tanks to Ukraine?" I was like, it's like no one expected that. Finally, let's talk China. China obviously is a big deal. People listen, the news media, firstly, uh, stop reading just the headlines. I mean, it's impossible to do it, but like, I don't know, slap yourself on a butt cheek if you think that this headline is making your head turn. Maybe this will get you back in action. If you read something like the new nuclear war is happening in 10 days if new agreement is not signed, it's like no, 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 no. It's like need to wake up and now drink a cold one, something like this. So it's the same with China saying that Blinken saying that China is looking into supplying lethal weapons to Russia. Firstly, not really something that I would worry about. If it would be some kind of lethal weapons, I would expect it to be mostly ammo and some kind of other weapons. But what we need to understand that I do not think that they will do it. Chinese economy is struggling. They are hiding a lot of their statistics, and I'm pretty sure there are some uh, China covering channels on YouTube. People in comment just recommend something if you watch this far. But there are channels that are covering China, and they are literally stating that Chinese economy right now is extremely hidden, and they're overrepresenting the figures, and actually they're either already in recession or they're fighting recession. And Russia, as much as China wants to have them as an ally to essentially help outweigh the dominance of the Western powers in the economic sphere, they are also super dependent on the Western economy, the US economy especially. And when representatives of the US, that your country is pretty much dependent, like your whole country, that can hurt. And Chinese are not that crazy as Russians to burn every bridges. While I definitely think that if the specific, as now China is a authoritarian regime under siege, we need to see that uh, it is still more thorough in their action plans than Russia is. They are actually considering options. This has been quite consistent in their statements, in how they're seeing this conflict. Ukraine is not the hill China is going to die on, but they really want to play for their agreements. What we need to understand is that China wants the West to be weak. So whenever they're saying is like, oh, Ukraine should be, signing this agreement. This is not for Ukrainians' sake. This is for the sake of the West. China wants us in Europe, for example, to accept shitty peace deals. They want us to have the defeatist mentality. They want to have for us to have a mentality of no victory is possible ever. It's always supposed to be some kind of half measure or whatnot. So there should have been always negotiations. And because right now the support for Ukraine is so strong that it's going to become a very clear one-sided victory if the support will continue in this space. And China sees that. And they're very threatened by it. That's why, for example, this 1E represented on a Munich Security Conference saying that China will come up with a peace plan. And they've talked it over with Kuleba. And with that peace plan, I think it's going to be something. Again, it hasn't been rolled out yet, but I'm expecting it to be essentially Minsk Agreement 3, where Russia probably will be forced to leave some territories. And I would think either it's going to be 23rd February line with some kind of plan of reintegration the territories into Ukraine. And then Crimean question will be postponed, like 50 years or something, like 20 years. Uh, that's going to be the peace plan. And I think it's going to be completely useless because Ukraine should never agree to it. What I do think that Ukraine should do is not reject it. I think the right strategy here would be to approach is to talking about this peace plan and putting an angle of attack that China would never do. Because the angle of attack that is both neutral and not as toxic and something that China would never do is war criminals. Like I think Ukraine said, like your peace plan is really good, but what about war criminals and Putin that started this war? We would like to get justification and all the war criminals of this war prosecuted. And that gives basically a completely indefensible position for the Chinese, because on one side, Ukraine is saying, yes, yes, it's a very nice plan. Like we're really interested in maybe Russians withdrawing and so on. But once it comes to, like the fact that war criminals needs to be prosecuted and brought to justice, at that moment, it becomes as like, yeah, well, that's not something Russia is going to do, and so on. So it's a very, very open question. And Zelensky and his team, they have proposed a 10-step plan for Ukraine, which is really good. And I think they need to stick to that. So overall, I do not believe that China will supply weapons to Russia because their economy is too dependent on the West. The peace plan that they're producing is going to be essentially Minsk 3. And overall, they want to have Russia as their vassal state. They do not want Russia to become pro-West. That would undermine their positions if there is a change in Russia. But the changes in Russia is the fundamental requirement for this war to be over. If there is no changes in the Russian government, then this war is just prolonging further and further. Summing it up, we see that there is a huge block of countries that are supporting Ukraine. A lot of the Northern Europe, and we're now seeing also Germany, France, the core of Europe, Great Britain, US are also our allies in Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. All of that group very clearly understand what this war is, and as the time goes by and the more and more discussions we're having, we're seeing what's the right finalization of war. Getting the troops out of Ukrainian territory, making sure that the war criminals getting prosecuted, reparations are paid to Ukraine, and the development plan is there to boost Ukrainian democracy for success, so it essentially becomes a strong democracy, just like the South Korea and Japan. I believe we as democracies need to be working and cooperating together, and we need to really closely look at the countries like Austria, Hungary, Serbia that are supporting authoritarian regimes that are fighting against democracies, that are saying essentially your democracies have no rights to live if the bigger power attacks you. So we need to look very closely in the mirror and recalculate how we're interacting with the rest of the world. Either it's going to be the third world countries that are having their own agenda and they're having their post-colonial representation, or if it's China that really wants the Western powers just to be weakened. China really wants to see Europe and America to accept again the defeatist mentality that I've talked so much about the idea that we need to accept that there is never a victory, that victory is something unachievable, and we should always have some kind of half-half decision. So that would allow, for example, them invade Taiwan and then say, well, we invaded Taiwan, so let's now have a 50-50 discussion where Taiwan is going to be the same as Hong Kong, and then we're going to get it back in 100 years or something. So that's the part. We as Europeans need to be strong, need to fight for our values. I believe the fact that we didn't fight for Hong Kong was a huge mistake. We should have done it. And overall, I'm really happy that we're waking up from this slumber and we're clearly understanding where we stand and how we want it to be. A lot of threats in the world, and what matters is that we stay strong. Ukraine is not only the fight for Ukraine itself, but the victory in Ukraine is what's going to define our countries and our politics and our mindset going forward. And especially, it's going to define our children. Thank you so much for listening to this amazingly long video. I love you all, guys. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.